Okay, so I will start, and with many thanks to Ivana, Lucia, and Bia for the opportunity to speak about our book, as it was announced, to a Latin American audience. In response to your request, we will focus our presentation on urban historical issues related to real estate development and financialization. So this makes more sense for scholars and graduates in urban studies. So and we can better connect while discussing these processes across the two continents. The next introductory slide provides a hint about Romania's economic position in Europe and the regional unevenness within the country. In 1990, Romania had a population of about 23 million, which decreased to below 19 million in 2022. The map on the left side of this slide shows that in 2024, countries of Eastern Europe, including Romania, had an average GDP per capita of around $19,000, while Western and Northern European countries had figures about $30,000 and in some cases above $60,000. In this regard, there were also differences among Eastern European countries. In Slovenia, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, this indicator was significantly higher than the average, whereas in Romania, it was set at around $12,000. Zooming in on Romania reveals its internal geographical unevenness, with its western and northwestern regions doing better economically. The second map of the slide shows that the highest percentage of the national GDP per capita was in Bucharest, above 200%, followed by the country's regional centers. In our research, as the map shows, with black dots, we focus on 8 cities, among them on Cluj-Napoca, which is part of Cluj County, a county that leads the hierarchy in regard of GDP percentage of the national GDP per capita, being followed by Brașov, Iași, and Dolj, and other smaller cities. Okay, so as it probably is clear, if you had time to go through the book briefly, that the book is based on a research we conducted entitled Class Formation and Reurbanization through real estate development at an eastern periphery of global capitalism. The central aim of this research was twofold. On the one hand, we analyzed the conditions for the emergence and advancement of real estate development in a formerly socialist, semi-peripheral East European country. On the other hand, we studied the role of real estate development in subordinate territories, such as Romania, viewed in the context of uneven territorial development at different scales. The role of the country in this larger picture, and the role of real estate development in this larger picture, included facilitating capital accumulation and financialization, reurbanization of the deindustrialized cities, and the formation of social classes. Moving from the local and national context to the global level allowed us to understand how the national was embedded in and shaped by global transformations of late capitalism. Using Romania as a case study, we illustrated how the country became part of the ongoing changes of the capitalist world system, and how global transformations were mediated through localized processes. These processes included dismantling state socialism and legitimizing its socialist urban development model based on industrialization and centralized planning. All of these processes subsequently led to marketized urban planning and privatized urbanism. In concrete terms, in our research, we analyzed the relations between the Romanian nation state and international financial organizations, such as the World Bank and the IMF. They all operated in the privatization of state-owned factories and other economic sectors, including housing. Moreover, we examined the relationships among local and global developers, investors, and financial institutions as they unfolded in Romania, leading to specific real estate development arrangements across localities. The process of transforming state socialism into neoliberal capitalism was conceived by actors orchestrating this process as the formation of the so-called emerging markets. This approach revealed the uneven power relations between, on the one hand, the developed capitalist countries or core countries or countries of the global north, and on the other hand, between the developing or peripheral or semi-peripheral countries and the global south. Often used as providers of cheap labor force, as you also know, exploitable natural resources and new markets for products made elsewhere. Even more, about Romania, it was only recently that the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, considering upgrading its capital market from what was called a frontier market to an emerging market. After 1990, the country's socialist economy was totally disrupted, and its economic and financial structures were erased, in parallel with the destruction of the former socialist transnational organizations and regional networks. Subsequently, Romania restarted its capitalist history as a subordinate country, entering a path of dependent development on Western foreign investment, and was also shaped by the rules governing its accession to the European Union. Similarly to how the semi-peripheral countries of Latin America were constrained in the 1980s to undergo the several structural adjustment programs imposed by the conditionality politics of international financial organizations, Central and Eastern Europe had to implement these programs starting in the 1990s. Eventually, in both cases, structural adjustment meant adjusting their economies and public policies in ways that created new investment opportunities for Western capital, which aimed to fix its problems of overaccumulation by spatially expanding its sphere of interest. In a few minutes, Ioana is going to characterize, to describe the changing urban development model in Romania after the 1990s. But we thought that it would be good if, before that, speaking to an audience from another continent, especially, it would be good to outline the characteristics of the former socialist urban development model. And even more, maybe to understand what socialist urbanization brought to Romania. We need to highlight the country's conditions before 1945, very briefly. And to do that, we should say that at the end of the 19th century, Romania had one of the highest illiteracy rates in Europe, with around 80% of the population illiterate. The interwar Romania was still by and large rural, with an agrarian economy and a population that predominantly lived in villages. In the 1940s, the country's urban population accounted for only about 20%. As you can see, our pictures, they show the poor, the housing inequalities in cities, where the bourgeoisie lived in villas, while many poor city dwellers made a living in mahalas. In the countryside, peasants lived in mud houses under harsh conditions. If we go further, characterizing the socialist urbanization in Romania, and also see some pictures reflecting that, we should start by saying that the post-war Romania nurtured a state developmentalist model that was focused on a centralized and planned economy, industrialization-related urbanization, the creation of a non-profit financial system, and the eradication of territorial inequalities. Because industrialization required a massive labor force that migrated from villages to towns, it involved urbanization policies focused on the construction of state-owned blocks of flats, mostly in cities, tailored to local needs. But measures such as electrification, the construction of schools and medical facilities, and street paving were also implemented in rural areas. Socialist urbanization was characterized by a strict spatial planning, including the systematization of localities. The ideal followed by the planners and constructors of those times was the creation of entirely new districts in the old towns, with blocks of flats and social infrastructure, including creches, kindergartens, schools, healthcare institutions, parks, movie theaters, and sport facilities. Between 1951 and 1989, almost 3 million flats were built with state budget. To address the high housing needs in the industrializing country, especially in big cities, the state recognized as a constitutional right the right to personal property, among others the right to a home, but one and only home. State-funded loans at very low interest rates facilitated the enactment of this right, enabling people to buy apartments in state-built blocks or build family houses on public land. Consequently, during state socialism, Romania displayed a mixed housing property regime with only 30% of homes in public ownership and the rest in personal property. Nevertheless, to avoid the exploitation of houses, which was also the reason for nationalizing the buildings of the bourgeoisie, the state controlled people's personal poverty. And now I will pass the floor to Ioana.
Thank you, Enikő. Thank you, everyone. Just to go further with the transformation after 1990. So the fall of the socialist regime meant a profound transformation of the economy, which was only possible with a profound restructuring of the state. In this transformation, the socialist urban development that Enikő just presented was replaced by a development model that actually served the accumulation of private capital. And in the following, we will go with you a little bit through the main aspects of this transformation. These are the aspects that we also followed in our REDURB research. So the main aspect of these transformations was the privatization of state-owned enterprises. And already in 1991, the law of privatizing state-owned enterprises stipulated the setting up of investment funds owning part of the assets of the state-owned enterprises, and was later listed on the Bucharest Stock Exchange. So privatization of factories, of enterprises, went hand in hand with establishing investment funds and making them private investment funds. Following privatization, many of the state enterprises were bankrupt, closed, and later demolished. And to give you an idea of the huge scope of this transformation, here is the case of Iași. It is the second most populous city in Romania after Bucharest, the capital. And as many cities, and as Enikő told you, during socialist times, it had a huge industrial development. And I hope you can see here the east part of the city, entire east side of the city, and south part of the city was industrial area. Hundreds and hundreds of hectares, thousands, tens of thousands of workers earning a living here. And you can imagine that when the factories were dismantled in the late 90s, this entire urban development model that had the factory and industrialization at its core was completely shattered. So this entire area of the city was actually abandoned, or slowly decaying from a buzzing area of the city into a decaying area of the city. And to give you just one small case, here in the industrial area of Iași, there was also Uzina Metalurgică, one of the few factories in Europe that produced certain types of steel pipes. And you see here, I hope you see one of the posters from the 80s of this factory. I like it very much. In the late 90s, this factory was bought by a private company with the only reason and only aim to close it and thus to kill competition. It was, being one of the few in Europe, it was an important competition. So the buyer had this plan to close it. The union leader at that time opposed the privatization and was assassinated in 2001. And the privatization went on, benefiting the final buyer of this factory, which is Arcelor. You know it, it's active also in Latin America, ArcelorMittal, a huge multinational company. So this is just one example, but all the cities of Romania went through this process. Then privatization of the housing stock, which started immediately with the regime change in 1990. And this happened because housing was allocated during socialist time to the workers through their places of employment, and the places of employment themselves were going through privatization. So state tenants were given the right to buy their rentals from the state at very low prices. And in the discussion part, we can talk about the negative and positive effects of this policy. And at the same time, the bourgeois properties that were nationalized during socialist times, and Enikő mentioned this already, were restituted to private owners. And this measure, of course, benefited mostly real estate investors and developers in large cities and around large cities, and at the same time caused massive evictions from formerly nationalized buildings. It is important to say that this restitution measure was a condition for Romania's European Union accession. It had to do it, and it had to speed it up from the 2000s on. And as a result of all these privatization measures, already in the 2000s, from 30% public housing stock, it's reached about 2% in public property, and now it is less than 1% of the entire housing stock in state property. Thus, we can see that the state retreated from its role of producer, administrator, planner of housing, and instead it retained only the role of sort of regulator, enabling markets to work, as the World Bank policy paper, quite famous at that time, required. So we saw that the state retreated from its role in industrial production, from its role of housing production, but it also retreated from urban planning. A series of legislative changes in urban regulation and construction regulation in the 90s and 2000s discreetly made that private developers and constructors become the main initiators of urban development and, of course, the main beneficiaries. However, in the last decade, this is not discrete anymore, but actually assumed as a policy, as an actual development model by the public authorities. And you see here the case of Reșița, a former very industrialized town. All its factories were closed. And now it is considered the best practice example at the national level because its local authorities have been inviting private investors as partners, as equal partners in redeveloping and regenerating the town. And I want to add something that is almost funny, but also very telling, that in the last 20 years in Romania, we had 6 mayors of big and medium cities that were very friendly with business and with real estate developers, and they became presidents, prime ministers, and presidential candidates in Romania. But the main actors linking industrial privatization, housing privatization, financial institutions privatization, and new real estate projects are in fact Western banks, West European banks, and a few US banks. And they were also the main beneficiaries of making the link between all these privatization processes. In the late 90s, they were the beneficiaries of the privatization of former non-profit state socialist banks. These were development and deposit banks that they bought directly from the state, including their client portfolios. Then in the 2000s, they were the main beneficiaries of the expansion of household credit and real estate credit, which we know are speculative forms of lending. And then after the 2008 crisis, these Western banks, together with real estate developers and with constructors, were the beneficiaries of a mortgage guarantee program from the state, which is somehow similar to the Minha Casa, Minha Vita program that started at the same year, and similar to other programs in the European Union and, for example, in Turkey. So this was a measure to support them all over the world. Then in the last decade, these banks were also important facilitators of large redevelopments on former industrial sites, where large, and thus in the case of Romania, foreign investors have become interested in parking considerable amounts of money. Former industrial land in Romania became important for real estate investors, especially after 2008 global financial crisis. So in the next cycle of accumulation and growth. And as you saw in the case of Iași, these were very large plots of land with good infrastructure and inside the city. And this is also an example from Iași, a rendition of a new project that is initiated by a private investor linked to pension funds in South Africa. So large investors linked in different ways to global financial flows could indeed park a lot of money in this kind of industrial land. And they could also brand themselves as green investors because they were regenerating former industrial ground. But of course, we know that these actors are also speculators, even if they present themselves, brand themselves as green investors, even if they present themselves as patient investors because they have long-term interests. Because in fact, their aim and their need is to keep prices increasing. And we also wanted to show you a bit of the research methodology and instruments of how we got into all these things, just so you get an idea of the kind of data that are accessible in our different contexts, because we imagine they are quite different. And in the case of Romania, it was quite hard to investigate all these things because, first of all, there hasn't been too much previous research on these processes after 1990. Secondly, because there is not much available public data on land, on property, on ownership, on companies, and even the available data is not complete. We don't always know what company is linked to another company, what they own, when they bought, when they sold, and things like that. So our methodology followed the analytical lenses that Enikő told you about, and they correspond to the 3 parts of our book that you see here synthesized in the last column. In order to understand the role of urbanization and reurbanization for the advancement of capitalism in a former socialist country, we try to look from the macro to the micro perspective. And we reviewed policies, legislation, statistics, directives at the European level and at the national Romanian level. And there were many things that we gathered, but just to give you two examples here. This is residential market prices in Romania, seeing how they have gone steeply up in the last decade and even more so in the last couple of years. Maybe to think how this is similar to what you see in your contexts. And then also profits in the domains of construction and real estate transactions. We thought this is interesting to show you the actual numbers because RON, the Romanian currency, is quite the same as the Reșița. And it was quite an adventure to get this kind of data. We tried to get it from the National Statistics Institute, but we couldn't. We don't know if they don't have it or they rather sell it, or but finally we got it through our university. And here again, we saw steep increases in the last decade, so from 2015, 2017, and some huge transactions that are signaling the entrance of very large investors in the Romanian market. Then on the other hand, or complementary, in order to understand how capitalism organizes our cities and the spaces in our cities at the European periphery, in order to extract profit from them, we try to look from the micro to the macro perspective. And in all our cities, we searched for materials on local histories, we did observation walks, we investigated different kinds of maps, we did interviews, we read archival press, new press, and we want to show you some of the maps that we used when we tried to discover these histories of real estate ownership, uses, and real estate transactions. And this is the example of Bragadiru, where our colleague Misha did his fieldwork. This is a third-tier city in the metropolitan area of Bucharest, the capital city of Romania. Its land used to be agricultural land during socialist times. It was feeding the development of Bucharest and of the area. Then land was restituted and privatized in the 90s. And what these maps are now showing is how land was gradually fragmented into smaller plots and how from agricultural functions it switched to residential functions. And of course, all this urban development was entirely private. The public authorities didn't even plan the basic infrastructure. And interestingly, people who live here are mostly above blue collar and below white collar workers in Bucharest. And because they are living here where real estate is cheaper, actually capital in Bucharest can keep the cost of labor lower. Some of these fragmented plots are used as credit collateral and represent mortgaged homes. And thus they are already caught in global financial flows via the West European banks. And what I also wanted to tell you is the fact that you see them in yellow on this National Land Registry map means that they were recorded in the land registry. And this usually means that they were at least once transacted or used as collateral. We have to tell you that we investigated many land registry maps of this kind and the data in it. We had to pay the land registry for them as they are not public. And we had to do a sort of detective work because we had to identify each plot to see what number it has. Then we also had to identify the bigger plot from which it was cut and the identification number of that plot, and then also the smaller plots in which one of the plots was cut. So we had to do this kind of detective work in all our cities, and then we paid the national enterprise monitor to get data on each of the companies that owned these plots, these pieces of land in a certain time period. In the case of Bârlad, for example, something interesting from the land registry data, we found that plots of former industrial land were cut and used as credit collateral by the companies that privatized the factories since the 1990s. The sums were quite big for empty plots in a third-tier city, in a less developed region of Romania. You see here, hopefully 2 million euro. You see here 7 million euro for quite small plots. And you see the names of the banks. These particular ones are have also Romanian and West European capital. But what this shows is that even in third-tier cities, in the hinterland, land and even undeveloped land, so empty land, is already tied into global financial flows, and its local use value is not so important anymore. It can stay empty. And in order to investigate how these contradictions between the local and the global were governed, we looked at the local public authorities, what they say, what they do, what they plan, what they don't plan, and how all these things changed over time. And for example, we asked the local public authorities in all our 8 case study cities for a specific type of data that is public, but is only available on requests for transparency. And interestingly, only 2 from the 8 cities answered these requests and provided the transparent data to show not only that they are transparent, but also how diligent they are on matters linked to real estate development. And Enikő will tell you a bit about these 2 cities.
Yes, so from now on, I will use examples from Brașov and Cluj-Napoca to describe how the financialization of real estate development occurred locally. To illustrate these larger processes that we tried to present you until now. The fundamental question we pursued in this endeavor was how global and local real estate and financial actors interacted at local level. Let's start with Brașov. I prepared just a slide with images, with pictures. These pictures actually reflect the transformation of former tractor factory that has around 20,000 employees at the end of the 1980s into mixed-use development. So these were the transformation of the former industrial platform into this mixed-use development was managed by the Ocean Company. So actually, these were the 2 big actors that played a role in the real estate development in Brașov. Just a few matters about tractor factory. After 1990, what happened to it? It was included in the first private sector adjustment loan that Romania received from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Tractorul underwent 4 unsuccessful privatization attempts and was eventually liquidated and sold at an open auction in 2007. First, a British investment company bought the factory. For this investment, Flavus Investiții took a 34 million euros loan from Shine Specialty Finance Fund registered in Cayman Islands. In 2009, the local council of Brașov authorized a zonal urbanistic plan for real estate development, elaborated by this British investment company with a Romanian office, obviously. And this company started demolitions in 2010, but due to the financial crisis, it stopped any interventions, and in 2012, it sold the factory and the whole land, which is around 120 hectares, so a giant territory, to the real estate branch of Ocean. As a first step, the real estate brand of Ocean, called Imoșan, created the Coresi shopping resort, but also entered into collaboration with local developers who built a large residential area in this former industrial territory, office buildings, and also a hotel. Besides these investments in Brașov, in the whole country, Imoșan, now Citrus, owned and managed 23 commercial centers in 2019. It defined itself as a key actor of urban regeneration. But let us hear some more characteristics and more developments of Ocean. As you probably know, it was established in France as a retail company in the 1960s by the Mouliez family. In 1976, they founded Imoșan as a property management business to support Ocean. In 2018, Imoșan was transformed and renamed Citrus, reflecting a changing vision and investment strategy, and the ambition to become a global urban player in multi-purpose property development. With this change, the former Imoșan redesigned itself as a developer, site manager, investor, and innovator, as they say. In 2023, Citrus reported that it owned nearly 300 shopping centers across 10 European countries, had a portfolio of more than 7 billion euros in real estate assets. Moreover, Imoșan and Ocean, which are non-financial companies, went through financialization. This began when Citrus purchased shares from a bank and soon thereafter became a majority shareholder in Onei Bank. Later, in 2019, Citrus began issuing corporate green bonds, becoming a financial player that sought to attract other investors' capital by selling these bonds. So Citrus was very quick to adopt a new philosophy of entrepreneurship, promising that it combines what they say profitability with accessibility and inclusion, as well as green generation. Ending quote. So let's switch to Cluj-Napoca. Oh yeah, I forgot to say that due to all these changes and to the foreseen plans for further investments, in 2020, Brașov was named the El Dorado of real estate development. Okay, and Cluj-Napoca in turn was baptized as a Silicon Valley of Europe. Why? Because of the economic changes that happened in the city. In 2018, almost 54% of the employees of Cluj worked in the service economy, which included a rapidly growing IT sector connected to global capital flows. Most of the companies running in the city are outsourced firms from Western Europe or USA. So this was the basis on which Cluj was ambitiously called the Silicon Valley of Europe. Real estate development in Cluj-Napoca started sooner than in other regional cities of Romania from the early 2000s. After 2014, massive mixed-use development spread across the city's former industrial platforms via so-called urban regeneration projects. In this context, foreign investors preferred the retail, office, and logistics real estate sectors, where they could maximize rental profits. Local or other Romanian developers, especially those with less capital, built residential buildings to sell quickly. The latter model began to change, however, a few years ago, especially amid rising bank loan costs and the interest of bigger real estate actors and investing in the residential sector. In the case of larger urban spaces or former industrial platforms, Romanian developers collaborate with foreign institutional investors. This is the case of the Rivus Mall project. You can see two pictures on the left side of this slide. A picture after the most of the demolition work happened, and this lower picture, which is actually shows a plan of how the new Rivus Mall is going to look like. This is an image from the zonal urbanistic plan developed by the company. So these interventions happened on a former factory. It was called Carbochem. And the plan, yes, is dominated by this huge mall, but also includes a few apartments and office spaces. Well, what happened in this project is that the Romanian developer, Julius Group, established in 1991, works together with an investment fund that manages a pension fund in South Africa called Atterbury Europe. This investment fund was registered in the Netherlands in 2014 and is listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And it has several investments, not only in Romania, but also in Serbia and Cyprus. Recently, in May 2025, the Rivus Mall project secured a syndicated loan of over 400 million euros from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Erste Bank, the Romanian Central Commercial Bank, a subsidiary of Erste Group, and the Romanian Development Bank, a subsidiary of Societe Generale. Another way through which new real estate developments are financialized is illustrated by the case of the office buildings called Liberty Technology Park. And I put a picture on this slide. This building resulted from the restructuring of a former furniture factory called Libertatea. The factory was privatized in 1994. Its production closed in 2010. It was sold to Freiburg Capital and reconverted into through several stages into an office building. At the end of 2015, it was already rented out to a few IT companies. In 2019, an American investor, Whitestyle Real Estate, purchased Liberty Technology Park. And here comes the financialization story. Whitestyle Real Estate took a 20 million euros mortgage loan from the Romanian Commercial Bank, using this property as collateral. And 2 years later, it continued the development on the former platform of Libertatea factory with residential complex. So after all these theoretical, methodological discussions and a few examples that we thought it would be good to share with you, let us formulate some of the conclusions of this presentation. And we sought to emphasize two big aspects. One, the fact that the transformation of former industrial platforms into sites of new real estate development reflects larger processes of change in Romania and Eastern Europe. And these include the shift from an industrial to a post-industrial society, the disappearance of the industrial working class people and the emergence of a middle class as an ideal, while what happens de facto is the fragmentation of laborers along the lines of educational status and income level. And last but not least, the transformation of state socialism into capitalism at the moment when global capitalism was already neoliberalized and financialized. And yeah, to stress four central ideas of our presentation. One of them would be to see the radical restructuring of the economy after 1919 as it happened in connection with restructuring of the state. It's also important to recall that while Romania was transformed into a capitalist market economy and society, capitalism continued to evolve and change at global level. Thirdly, the semi-peripheral role of Romania in the capitalist world system is reproduced, among others, via the subordinate character of real estate development and its financialization. And last but not least, the territorial unevenness within Romania, between regions, counties, cities, and within cities, is reflected and recreated by the uneven real estate development evolving in the various geographies of the country. So now here it's time for us to stop and welcome your questions.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I have comments and questions. What I propose, if you want, is I open now the questions. I add my questions at the end, or at first if nobody has further questions. But thank you for the very interesting presentation, and I really think there are so many things in common with our region in so many different ways. And I guess my questions go in the direction of asking you exactly about those parallelism. But I open the floor for questions. Open just your mic and tell your question if you want. Okay, I guess nobody has questions at the beginning, but then I'll ask my questions. Well, thank you once again, Enikő and Ioana, for the presentation. I'm probably going to repeat some of the things you said, but to reinforce some of the parallelisms and the things in common I see. First of all, the first part of the book, it's really open up the market and market making in a way, because you describe the conditions of possibility, as you call it, and how these conditions of possibility were at some point in the debate of being gradualist or really shock doctrine. Taking from Manuel Albert's chapter, it was really, or what we can say, a shock absorber of capital and really a shock doctrine, in the sense that the transformations were so fast and so quick. And in those transformations, obviously the geopolitical factors, the role of the IMF and the World Bank were very similar in Eastern Europe than they were here in Latin America. The creation of new ways of dependency, and as you call it in your text, new ways of peripheralization of our regions within the international order. One thing you didn't discuss now, but I really liked about your text was how this also came with the construction of regional benchmarks to which Romania is compared to, like Bulgaria, and how these countries that were later incorporated into Europe suffer a different trajectory than the countries that were previously incorporated in the European Union, and how the European Union, in a way, is a cushion for this transformation, and in the multi-scalar process, the European Union has a lot to do with this transformation. So I guess one of my first questions would be, what was in the end the role of the European Union in these transformations, and how the World Bank and the IMF use the European Union as a layer to mediate in this transformation. The other things that draw my attention from the book and from your presentations were the fact that you, as I said, combine these different scales of analysis in an interesting way, in the sense that it's really hard for peripheral countries and peripheral cities to understand what is going on there without understanding the economic restructuring, as you said, the state restructuring, and also ideological restructuring, social restructuring, class restructuring, political restructuring, neoliberal or post-industrial restructuring. So there are so many restructuring processes going at the same time. And I guess on that regard, one of the questions I have, and also emerged from the presentation, is that this post-industrial restructuring in Romania, what is now the main economic basis of the economy to support turning Romania into a service-based society? What is left? What is the specific role of Romania within the region? What is Romania providing to Europe now, so that the service can, I guess my question is, how these shopping malls will survive if there is no middle class or upper middle class consuming in this economy? So in that sense, it's like, what is Romania selling to Europe now to support that turning into a service-based economy in these urban areas? So I guess that would be my second question, because I didn't fully catch how are these, in a way, new spaces supposed to be sustainable even for capital if there are no economic basis to support this transition into a post-industrial society. I guess so in this idea of real estate as a means of accumulation and spatial fixing, I was really interested in this idea of Romania becoming an emerging market after being a frontier market, and now it has been upgraded into an emerging market. And as an emerging market, I guess Romania is obliged or is asked to socialize privatize the commons. Like I'm assume that Romania has, as you said also in the book, cheap labor force, public debt, public land, a sort of middle class whose salaries can be extracted from and also the fact that there was so much infrastructure created during socialism. So there were a lot of common things to extract from when privatization took place, and now, of course, with a new wave of investments. And I guess in that sense, and connected with my previous question, I was wondering about this new wave of investments. What is Romania offering in this new wave of investments? Once shopping malls, retail areas, logistic places have been created, you mentioned a new cycle of foreign investments in the territory and a new moment of accumulation. So I was wondering again, what has Romania? How is Romania being sold to investors in this new process? On the other hand, I wanted to thank you about your methodology remarks, because we face the same problems when it comes to finding information in our specific country. I know Brazil is very different because these transformations have been taking place for longer and at the different scale. So there is a sort of network of consultants who have produced and published a lot of information, while I guess in our smaller countries, this has to be done by hand by researchers, and it really takes a lot of, it's time consuming and takes a lot of work because we're so-called non-transparent markets. And well, that remark was especially interesting for students. But my last questions, and is something that also I think Manuel mentioned, or you three mentioned in the introduction, I don't remember, is about this that socialism, far from being a barrier for this transformation, was in fact what would make these transformations worse in a way. So I wanted you to probably develop a bit more about this idea. I can understand that this infrastructure was available very easily for profit once privatizations were put in place. But I was wondering if you could reflect more about how socialism was actually an enabler, and in a way. I guess sorry for my long comments and questions, but I guess we can add questions if someone has further questions.
Maybe we go with them. Maybe we go with them because they are quite consistent. How you think?
Okay.
No, I would like, yeah, Ioana, I don't know if what you prefer, but maybe I have short comments, not so deep like the Ivana ones. But first of all, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, and make us to think a lot about the similarities, but also the difference in how this, how can we think about joint projects, things like that. So maybe I would add, maybe I would put some comments and also some questions. First of all, if you can develop a bit more, and I think maybe together with the questions Ivana put about the local investors or local constructors. You mentioned, because here in Brazil, even we see the insertion of global financial actors, the participations of local global agents, the participation of local investors are still very important, and they many times they acting like an enabler of the project and make some more assume some risks and make the flow of investment more clear and more secure. Because one question that I have is the whole of this kind of actors, if they are, because I think this is the difference that Ivana mentioned about the socialism. I see like the whole of the socialism very important in the centralizations of the general conditions such as infrastructure, but also industrialization, and how this is different between our countries. As I mentioned, like economic groups are really important here in Brazil. And also what I thought is that you mentioned that the economy is service-based, and here in Brazil and in Argentina as well, we saw a change not from industrialization to service-based, but from industrialization to reprimarizations, and how this dynamics of flow exchange make the dynamics different. What I mean that we became a exporter of primary goods such as soya and all of the stuff that we have now, and you have service-based. So I think this is a quite different. So maybe from now on I will just to highlight some difference. And for me, a huge difference when I think that maybe we are joined in some process like semi-peripheries in the context of financialization. But when you saw, and it was really interesting, the change in the space between previous socialism and socialism, we saw large infrastructures. We saw large housing production. And this is quite different from the Department of countries. I think even more Brazil, that to have more or less 50 housing stock being self-building. So how do you think this make difference? And the second question is if infrastructure itself has been also object of privatizations, because here in Brazil we saw this double channel of finance in session, real estate and free infrastructure as well. And so how PPPs and other kind of privatization is also inserted with infrastructure, and how what we are seeing now in our countries, that this huge connection between infrastructure and real estate, and how they combine in a country that more or less has much more investment in infrastructure. Just a final comment, and maybe a kind of tension, this idea of post-industrial, with so much construction in your case. It's not real estate industry itself. We can see that what I mean. We had a lot of construction. We have a lot of work. So it's not the same kind of industry. It's not a kind of industry itself. And more we are seeing in Brazil that we have a kind of industry based on management of real estate that itself include a lot of work in a very cheap work with involved in service like clean management of the building itself. So it's not kind of different kind of industry, and even in the service, it's also what I'm saying, that's a huge discussion here in Brazil, if we can say about desindustrialization. What I want to mean, that we see this industrialization in the way we know in the 70s, but are we not seeing another kind of industry? But maybe it's like a future comment just to tension this idea of post-industrialization, post-industrial society. Thank you. I don't know, let's.
Your mic is off, Bia.
No, so maybe let's return and then the students can think about other questions for later on.
We have students and colleagues as well.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah. So then we should try to start answering very broad questions. Ioana, if you don't mind, I will start, but I will not take all the questions and leave you for the more difficult part to answer what was left. Okay, so I would start with Ivana's first question about the role of the European Union in the transformation of Romania. Indeed, we could say that this would be a big difference between how the structural adjustment programs and the involvement of World Bank and IMF happened in Eastern Europe versus Latin America. Because in your countries, you had the direct involvement of these organizations. And indeed, in Eastern Europe, there was this third actor, the European Union institutions at large, which definitely played a role. Nevertheless, the first major actors that pushed for privatization were the World Bank and IMF, starting very early in 1990 with a series of loans and the conditionality politics that they practiced through these new loans given to Romania. So the European Union did not act as such, but starting with the end of the 1990s, there was already put on the horizon of the development of Romania, you know, the integration, the accession to the EU. So we could also say that all these privatization processes were and the conditionality politics of international financial organizations were connected to what happened later with the conditionality politics of EU accession, which meant the changes of the whole Romanian legislation, actually, right? So that was okay, yeah, it was very well thought plan of how, you know, how to disconnect former socialist countries from one each other, from one of each other, you know, and the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, the Warsaw Pact, all were demolished, destroyed. Also, obviously, with the end of the Soviet Union and all that complicated history. But what happened afterwards was that, yeah, these countries were put into competition in a way and measured and compared, you know, who is doing best in terms of accession, who is doing best in terms of replying to conditions and fulfilling the conditions. And Romania and Bulgaria were, as you said, behind Central European countries, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, which were always congratulated of being much more ready to privatize and much more ready to adopt EU legislation. Okay, but since as the accession happened in the case of Romania, that happened in 2007, the country still had to continue, you know, adapting to how the EU changed, actually, because, yeah, the story is not that we had a European Union which remained unchanged and we have the transforming Romania. So they all changed actually in parallel and in an interconnected way. So obviously, the rules of the European single market had to be adopted in Romania, which meant the free movement of capital, among others, but also the free movement of people. And actually, what happened with privatization and bankruptcy and closing of enterprises and productive economic units actually created a lot of surplus population in Romania that, due to this free movement of capital principle, could move abroad, and there are still like 4 million people doing that. Looking for jobs. And then, I don't know, the Stability and Growth Pact, you know, which has very strict rules regarding public deficit, public debt, very strict rules of how to implement fiscal measures, and how, at the end of the day, all these measures mean the reducing public spending into public investments, public goods, public pensions, public salaries. You know, and then, okay, the European Banking Union, again, the Romanian Central Bank is very much dependent on the European Central Bank, and this shows these fluctuations in quantitative easing and quantitative measuring measures. And I don't know, last but not least, the Capital Markets Union. As we said, Romania lagged, it lags beyond other countries. So seemingly we don't have enough mature enough capital markets. So therefore now the pressure is, I guess, about this, you know, how to create more investment opportunities in Romania, and how to make these de-risking measures in the country. I guess I would also take this question about the post-industrial. We used it in our conclusion very explicitly, that we see that this transformation is about, transforming the industrial-based economy into a post-industrial society. This was somehow formulated as an ideal to be followed by Romania, which obviously also meant a kind of mental shifts, you know, in how we thought about the country and how people thought about country. But as Bea, you very properly said, this was not about the disappearance of industry altogether, not even of the old industries, but productive economy, enterprises, but it meant the restructuring of the economy, right? The service economy started to have more and more importance. And the remaining productive industries actually were very much transformed, obviously. So obviously today we don't have factories with 5, 10, 20,000 employees. And this also is about, you know, reducing the potential pressure potentially coming from the working class, you know. Also a kind of reindustrialization happened. So yes, what happened, that the socialist way of organizing industries totally disappeared, but a reindustrialization process happened with the involvement of foreign capital, and you know, making small productive units across Romania, which were integrated into global flows of production. So a huge dependency on German companies, first of all, but also French, British, companies as well. And nowadays, as we speak, we see how much Romania also now has to integrate into its development plans and ways of thinking about its role, the reindustrialization of Europe plan, which nowadays unfortunately goes through this Rearm Europe program, and of which people wait that industry will be reborn in Europe through this rearmament process. Okay, so yeah, and real estate is also an industry, you said. We are especially if we see the construction companies, right, where we still have the case of exploitation of laborers, and still the production of buildings is relying on the labor of the working class. But in addition to that, we have this speculative realm of real estate as a non-productive realm. So the two go together in a way. And maybe some words about socialism as an enabler of capitalism, but I'm sure Ioana will also add to that too. I don't know. I would say that this is true not only in relation to Romania and Eastern Europe or former socialist countries, but also in relation to the world system, I would say, because with the disappearance of socialism as a potential alternative way of organizing economy and of thinking about development aims and people well-being, so the disappearance of this system physically and mentally globally means an enabling factor for spreading capitalism and really becoming a global order, right? So therefore we say that what happened in Eastern Europe after 1990 is actually a crucial point in the transformation of the whole global order. And the end of the Cold War, right, which is also part of the story. And even today, these former socialist countries play an important role in ideologically speaking, like, this very strong trend of anti-communism is still very much nurtured in our countries, and is also used in core capitalist countries, I guess, to always remind us that there is no alternative to capitalism because existing socialism disappeared, it was not efficient, or whatever reason it disappeared. So they use even today this as an argument for the lack of any alternative to capitalism, and also to put obstacles in organizing against the system as a legitimate collective endeavor, political endeavor. So
I can take it from here and address the question about socialist infrastructures actually facilitating capitalist transformations. This was actually a point that we disagreed with Manuel, and we tried to negotiate this, and because he raised this point based on research in Poland that he didn't actually do himself, but collaborated with a Polish researcher. And we know the research, and we know the case study that they had in the city of Warsaw, the capital of Poland. And it's a very interesting research. We recommend it, but it's also not super complete to the end. So we said, no, it's actually the dismantling of socialist infrastructures that helped build capitalism and not the infrastructures themselves and how they were. So, okay, if you want to make a point that pipes and poles on which you have electricity help capitalism, then yes, of course, then you can say that any developmentalist effort helps capitalism, but this is not correct, actually. You can push the argument, but it's not really how it goes. So we discussed this issue that actually dismantling what these banks meant helped develop the private banks. So it was not that because the state, the socialist state had deposit banks, that then the German banks were so strong. But the fact that they dismantled these banks and turned them into something else and used the portfolio of clients, like retirees getting their pensions on the cards and in the accounts, this is how they made their profits in Romania. So it's more complex than we think. It's more complex than how he summarized it. To link this with Bia's question about local constructors, you have a good intuition because former state companies of construction and development, urban development, were privatized and they became big constructors, local constructors. They get contracts with the state, for example, to build some or rebuild some infrastructure or some state buildings, but not only. They make the market in many contexts, and they are the main actors when there is a crisis, for example. Many of them don't work with loans, but reuse their money. They roll over their investments. But there is a tension between them and the big investors and developers, because, and you can see that in press accounts, because when the big foreign investors come in, the press goes with them. Many times they are also paid by the big ones, and then the local ones are portrayed as corrupt, as not following the urban planning regulations, as not being aesthetic enough. So when there's a crisis and where there's a need to keep or to create a market, the small local ones are praised, that they give employment and they make some kind of economic activity happen. But when this is over and the big ones come in because they see there is a bubbling environment, then these small ones are not needed anymore. And we even have an interesting interview, someone saying, even all of us who made quite many millions, we could hardly compete with the largest national investor, not to speak of those who come from abroad and have so much more money and can obtain much bigger loans for development. So that's quite interesting. And then about infrastructure connected to this, I would say that infrastructure is not yet financialized in the way that you see it and in the way that we read about Africa, for example. So highways are still not privatized. Ports are being landed, so the state gives them as to tenants, and the tenants can make the profits there. And of course, these are usually big international tenants. Railway is partially privatized, but not the rather the commercial one, and not the human transport. So, and this is privatized through the Deutsche Bahn, the German railroad. And this is also a reminder that Germany is the hegemon of Europe. And many times when we speak of the EU, is actually the interest of Germany. Germany is the main exporter for all the EU countries. And also it is the main developer of industry in Romania for export. So the main the main exports of Romania are also controlled by the German. So this is what Enikő said, how industry was reorganized. There is not a complete deindustrialization, but a reorganization of it so that it connects very well to the German car exports. That's the German car industry. That's the main thing. This also to link this to migration and to say that the migrant Romanian laborer is the main investor in Romania. So most of the money from abroad are remittances from labor abroad. And this is what also fuels consumption. And it was actually a very interesting overlapping after 2007, 2008 crisis. This is also the time when Romania joined the EU. So laborers could go in other EU countries in the West to work more easily, not very easy, but more easily than before. And this is how the population managed the crisis and the austerity that followed it. At the same time, it is when big retailers come to Romania, and Enikő showed you Auchan, and they are the ones that take over retail in Romania. You see the small retail being dismantled, and they are taking over everything that means retail. This is actually very interesting, connecting back. So there is a tension between commerce and industry in Romania and in all the cities that we research, because and this also complicates the relationship between commerce and industry, because sometimes logistics is considered industry. So how to deal with that? Because it's actually commerce, but it is measured as industry. It's also real estate. It's also construction. It is also construction industry, but it's all linked to commerce. And I think there are tensions, and some points are not easily answered. But the trend is for sure to serve these international commercial chains, and Romania to become a logistics center. This is increasing. I would say that industry so productive industry is still here, controlled by the Germans, Italians, French. But it is increasingly a consumption territory, a territory designated for consuming. And and maybe to this links to what Ivana also asked, what will come next for Romania as an emerging market? It means privatizing everything that is left. So public health is still partially here. Public education is still partially here. The pension funds are still quite big public, but they have to be privatized more. So this will increase this trend towards commerce and consumption. And probably, as Enikő said, migration will still send money for this. And for migration is also big consumption of real estate. I hope this didn't complicate.
Romania will emerge now. Oh my God. I think Francisco, no, you're saying goodbye. Okay. Is anyone, does anyone want to add a question? I guess from your last points, I would say with Bia that this foreignization drastic severe foreignization of the economy might be something to compare Latin America to Eastern Europe, that the process here has been, I would say, strongly mediated by national and local actors, in the sense that in the case of Argentina, I would say that it's not very profitable for foreigners to come to the country. In the case of Brazil, it's because there is like a big economic, structural class organization of bourgeoisie, national bourgeoisie, that still supports the main aspects of the economy and controls, even with a stronger presence of foreign actors. But I would say that that national character is still very much present, and there is no as much tension with the foreigner, but like hybridization, I would say. Like it's really very much interacted with foreign actors.
Yeah, and I just to add, Ivana, I think that these national actors are indeed very functional for international capital, because the international capital come for a short term, and then the national becomes as long-term investors. So even the development of a variety of like financial instrument is a way of international capital penetrate in a very flexible way. So they can come and they can out without not so many barriers. So I think this is what characterize more. But it's interesting to say how, so in some countries in Latin America, at least in countries like Ecuador, these migrations, returns are very important for the economy. There are some countries in Latin America that this dynamic is bigger than like the national capital or something like that. So it's interesting to see some parallel, but very related with some more the small countries like Ecuador, I think Colombia as well.
Yeah. I was thinking to add something to matters of infrastructure development, and how is that related to the military industry, because I consider that the military industry is the high point nowadays everywhere in Europe, and including Romania. And one may expect that the infrastructure development, but maybe also real estate development linked to the military industrial complex will be a channel through which real estate development may survive in a context where everybody expecting economic recession, and related to economic recession, less purchasing power from the side of the population and less consumption power. So I think, yes, this is what is going to happen. And this is expected also from Romania to take on this road of development. Maybe I was thinking to complete this issue with the EU, because I said that until the accession to EU, the EU did not come with loans towards Romania, as World Bank and IMF did. It had another role. But we can see that since the COVID pandemic, this trend changed. So the European Union, especially the European Commission, is acting as a borrower from the international financial markets. It takes loans from the international financial markets and transfers these loans towards the EU member states. So this happened with the Next Generation EU program, in order to help the countries to recover after the pandemic. And this happens also with the REARM Europe program. So countries are receiving loans through the mediation of the European Commission. So this is, I guess, the financialization of military industry also, which is a trend. And yeah, and also the recent, as Ioana said, there are very many ongoing conditions even now, you know, and all those conditions came in a package with the so-called Recovery and Resilience National Plan, which was elaborated to tackle the effects of the pandemic, but actually came with a lot of conditions. One of these conditions being enlarging the private pension funds, which is very much connected to the idea, make Romanian capital markets better and integrate Romania much better into the capital markets union of the EU, because private pension funds are a very important source for investing into whatever investors want to invest, right? And also the liberalization of the energy sector, you know, it's was put as a condition, and actually this created one of the biggest disasters in terms of economic growth, also at the societal level, and also in the life of households, right? The costs of energy, electricity, gas, which actually became an obstacle in economic development and the well-being of households.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ioana and Enikő, for this wonderful presentation. I'm like here with Bia. We all always try to theorize from the periphery, and I see so many similarities. So definitely a starting point for collaborations to deep into the subordinate character of our semi-peripheries or peripheral countries, and I think this is very interesting, and the role of real estate in this new geopolitical time is also, I think, under-theorized for now, so it's our job to do that. Thank you very much, really, Enikő and Ioana. It was super interesting. I don't know, Bia, if you want to.
No, just also, I think I share the same impressions of Ivana. I think there is a lot of theoretical work to be done. So it's a pleasure. It was wonderful to hear you. And I hope this is a start for many exchanges. So thank a lot, Ioana and Enikő.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a huge pleasure to hear you and your work when we visited you in 2024. So well done to all of you. We have heard also from the PhDs, and they are doing great work. So good luck with your work, and looking forward to read from your work as well, and maybe some presentations from you in the future.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, and maybe some collaborations in the future, who knows? Also through doctoral graduate students and researchers. And
Funding from the EU, but
not we wouldn't have very much success, I guess, with a very critical projects. And yeah.
Okay.
Actually, we thought, and I don't know, maybe this is just an idea of further collaboration. We thought about addressing the role of real estate development in post-war reconstruction, as this is a very hot topic globally, as we see it in Gaza, with the, plans of turning Gaza into a Riviera of Middle East, but also the post-war reconstruction plan in Ukraine. We see already the whole big investment funds and asset management companies who are there and are preparing for reconstruction. So again, I guess this is a terrible history and moment that we are going through, and maybe we can do something together about this to reveal it. That wars are not only opportunities for capital accumulation and profit making from the arms industry, but also are opportunities as far as post-war reconstruction is considered. So post-war reconstruction creates a new opportunity for real estate development, that's sure. So maybe we can try to understand it.
Absolutely. Well, I wrote that in the agenda. So thank you very much. Have a good morning, rest of the morning, afternoon for you over there, and hopefully we'll see each other next year or this year. Bye everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye. Good luck. So good to see you.
Thank you.